I'm Bronwyn Morgan with Zio Air, and I am at AUVSI Xponential 2021 here in Atlanta. And it's so exciting to bring our podcast, ZioCast, live to AUVSI. We're talking to industry leaders across geospatial, drones, robotics, space, artificial intelligence, AI-based weather systems, and so much more, including advanced aerial mobility, UTM, government. It doesn't stop. So look forward to you joining us and listening to our leaders talk about what's happening with unmanned systems, drones, and more. We're so excited today to be joined by a friend of mine, Gary ONeal. Gary is Senior Research Engineer at Georgia Tech, Senior Aerospace and Defense Specialist for the Center of Excellence, the Aerospace Unit for the Georgia Department of Economic Development, and runs the Georgia UAV Working Group. Gary, welcome to ZioCast Live. So great to have you.
Well, it's great to be here, Bronwyn.
Absolutely. Well, you've got an interesting path through academia as well as your other background before that. So tell us how you got into the space of UAS in the work that you're doing now.
Okay. Well, I guess it started out with my degree in aerospace engineering from Georgia Tech. I went into the Navy, and actually, as a Navy midshipman, I had my first experience with UAVs on a summer cruise. The Navy in the early 70s had a helicopter that was unmanned and would launch from a ship and fly out 20, 30 miles and drop torpedoes.
Early 70s.
Yeah. So UAVs have been around a long time. I was a helicopter pilot and aerospace engineer for the Navy. Came up okay. And as a result of that, kind of fell into the research and development world at GTRI. And as part of that, I started working as a kind of an in-house consultant with the Georgia Department of Economic Development. Shameless plug here, www.georgia.org is our website, and you can find us there. And in 2010, my then boss, Steve Justice, said, we ought to look out ahead and see what's going on. What are going to be the new things that we need to pay attention to? And UAVs popped up. And this is well before the commercialization in the FAA Act in 2013. But we could see that military applications were starting to kind of lend themselves to public safety kinds of things, and that commercialization was on the way. So in 2010, we formed this little informal group that you became part of, and we've enjoyed having you all along, called the Georgia UAS Working Group. And we met quarterly, and as things have evolved, the group has changed as well. It started out mostly academic researchers that were doing DoD-related projects and in UAVs, and then slowly, as the FAA and the idea of commercializing drones started to take hold, we had more people, such as yourself, show up, and now we're probably 70-30 commercial versus DoD in terms of our membership and their interest, and certainly the use of small drones, as was initially permitted by the FAA, crested a lot of activity and interest, and we helped a lot of people with Section 333, which was the precursor to Part 107. We helped people get to the resources there, and we helped public safety organizations in 2015, 2016 start to engage, and we even helped organize a statewide event at the Georgia Public Safety Training Center in 2018 with the FAA's help, and we had 32 local emergency management agency and public safety agencies, 32 teams, all running sort of a friendly competition with 5 different scenarios in using drones in a single day.
Wow.
And it was a fun experience.
Yeah.
And it helped the public safety agencies see the potential for drone use that they hadn't thought about.
Right.
And so it's been growing ever since.
Wow. Well, based on your experience in academia and with government, are you seeing an evolving audience, evolving both in terms of understanding and as well as acceptance and just the breadth and scope of operators?
Yes. Yeah, the short answer is sure. As the technology has come along, as the ability to miniaturize things and put GPS receivers on small units and to do the video signal processing for object avoidance and things like that have come along. Certainly, there's been an evolving set of interest groups, if you will, and so initially with the commercialization, we saw a lot of people who thought that imagery in agriculture was going to be the big deal, and then that kind of shifted to imagery of infrastructure, and now it's kind of imagery for assisting construction and that sort of thing. So it's moving, and now with the advent of the thought of getting to a slightly larger drone, the package delivery that started with Amazon and Wing and the others, UPS, where they were kind of limiting themselves to a 5-pound package.
Right.
It's starting to grow a little bit.
Absolutely.
But that use case and that business case for that has been, there have been a lot of pilot operations to try it out, and some have been fairly successful, but they all have kind of said, okay, we understand it now, and then they've kind of faded into the woodwork a little bit because they're still waiting for things to catch up so that there's a business base.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yes, and in clearly the public safety arena has changed quite a bit because back in 2015, 2016, it was typically a fireman or a policeman who had bought his own drone from Best Buy, and had it in his car and was playing around with it, and then they kind of talked the bosses into buying a few, and then companies like Skyfire, the local Atlanta company here, kind of just blossomed and helped through the FAA IPP program and some of the other initiatives to show public safety just how versatile a tool it could be. And and then again, the technology hasn't stopped. It keeps going and going and going. But so more and more applications are being found, and more ways to use it. And as a sideline, I work with a master's level course at Georgia Tech, and we do projects for systems engineers. And even industry is now looking at drones for purposes that you wouldn't have thought of.
Right.
But that when you see it, you're like, yeah, that makes sense.
That makes sense.
The old phrase that Mike Wilson from the FAA and the others used to talk about was, drones are going to replace the dangerous, dull, and dirty jobs. Well, in industry, there are plenty of those.
Absolutely.
And companies are now starting to look at that as an offset. So I think there's going to be an even broader use in the commercial world, and as your other guests have noted, we don't know what we don't know.
Absolutely.
It's an evolving thing, and somebody stands back and says, hey, why don't we do that?
Right.
And
you can even see that here at the show.
Yeah, and it makes sense. So yeah, the academic interest has been growing and changing. Clearly, 15 years ago, it was all about military stuff.
Right.
It was all about fighting and assisting soldiers with situation awareness and things like that. And now it's evolving into how can we help people in various ways. And so it's an exciting time.
It is.
It is fun to be in the middle of it in a way.
I always say that we're in a disruptive industry, and it is being disrupted while we're in it.
Yeah.
So it's like you're on the cutting edge.
Itself.
It is, right? Well, based on the business needs and the business use cases, and some that haven't even blossomed yet, and combining that with policy. When you think about things like UTM and DAA capabilities becoming a reality for professional operations, when do you really see, and everybody kind of has a different take on this, UAVs, really being integrated into the national airspace at a broader level?
Yeah, it's a great thing to talk about because there are a lot of people working the problem. NASA with the UTM and focusing on the small drones and how we're going to keep them from running into each other below 400 feet. And then along comes the urban air mobility folks, now advanced air mobility, and they talked about operations at 400 feet and below for about 20 minutes and then said, yeah, we're going to go higher. And truly what they've become are helicopters. They're in the same airspace doing the same kind of mission that conventional helicopters are doing now. They're just kind of helicopter 2.0. So that airspace is going to have to be shared, but because they're essentially the same vehicle, it shouldn't be that hard because the same methods and uses will be applicable to them as they generate and become part of the airspace. The real question is notionally this idea that the little guys are going to fly at 400 feet below, stay out of the way of the big guys. That's a good stratification. The advanced air mobility folks are going to fly somewhere between ground and maybe 2,000 or 3,000 feet, and that, again, that's useful because that airspace is fairly uncongested, and there's really no need for them to go any higher.
Right.
They're just burning battery to get higher. So there's kind of a natural separation layer there for the differences here, the airspace between the points. The question is, how are we going to, where the three of them are going to intersect, the big airplanes coming from the national airspace with the FAA, the AAN, and the drones all delivering right in the same footprint. That's going to be the challenge. And it's going to stay a challenge until we figure it out. And I'm not smart enough to know that answer, but while there are a lot of people that are optimistic about, the technology will solve it, I do believe that, but I also believe that simplifying the problem to say, well, we're going to put 5G on everything and it'll work. Well, when you're on a cell phone and your 5G blanks out for a couple of seconds, it's no big deal.
Right.
If it blanks out on an advanced air mobility or a small drone package, it's a bigger problem.
Yeah, it is.
And so we have to find a way to make that robust and resilient to those failures, because there are going to be times when that 5G network gets saturated.
That's true.
And then we need to know that ahead of time, or think about it ahead of time, because when it happens, we have to be prepared.
Absolutely. What do you think are, and I ask everybody this question because it is an interesting one, what are the barriers or what's slowing us down from moving faster or working on this at a rate that is producing some of these solutions more collaboratively? What do you think is slowing us down?
That's a question of perspective. For the people who want to build the technology and get it out there fast, nothing can move fast enough. Right.
True.
For the users and for the customers, they might want to have it happen at a slightly different rate. Right. So the things that are holding us up, I think, really depend on the perspective of the individual who's making that comment.
That's true.
Okay. And when you have a very complex system with a lot of stakeholders, it's hard to get unanimity unless you go to the lowest common thing. And the problem with that kind of consensus is, as a Japanese gentleman told me years ago about the way they do it in Japan, consensus is achieved when nobody's happy enough to smile and nobody's mad enough to yell.
That's a good one.
So it's nobody gets what they want.
Right.
They're all like, okay,
Right.
this will work. Yeah.
Right.
So, I'm part of that debate, and I hear that debate all the time that we're not moving fast enough. Well, by whose measure, right? The technologists will tell you we can do it tomorrow. Well, yeah, but where are you going to get all the lithium batteries? Where are you going to get the mechanics to put the batteries in? There's a time constant that has to happen in order to roll this out effectively.
Right.
And if you do it too fast, you stumble.
Right.
And if you do it too slow, you lose.
Right.
So it's finding that balance and that magic thing. And unfortunately, it has to be somewhat market driven. I mean, we have to be solving problems that people feel strongly enough about to want to use. Right? It's quite simple. I mean, way back in the old days, Henry Ford Model T, cars were around, but people still used horses and buggies.
That's true.
Because it was, cars weren't reliable.
Right.
And so
it's a transition.
Yeah, there is a transition, and so the question is, how fast should it move, and should we insist that it move at the same speed everywhere,
Right.
or can we allow things to grow organically, if you will, in different places and then be adopted by more and more as they go by?
Right.
Because there's no technology, there's no product that can serve 300 million people instantaneously.
Right.
Somebody has to get it first.
Right.
Somebody has to use it first so that other people can say, yeah,
That works.
that'll work.
Right.
That's what our...
And you work out the business model as well.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, how, from your vantage point, how will academia and local governments, and those are two very different, streams of thought and work patterns and deliverables, play a role in the continued UAV and UAM, for that matter, or AAM proliferation?
Well, I think they're going to do things similar to what they're doing now. The academics are the guys and young men, young women coming up with the crazy ideas and working on the technology to solve a problem. And the local governments are the ones that allow that first test case, right? Places like Curiosity Labs, places like down in Peachtree City, all the little incubators that pop up are the places that local government helps facilitate so that the ideas can come out of the lab and start kind of peeking at real life, right? And start getting it. And then local governments become the advocates to the state level. And they the local representatives say, hey, this is great. We want to have somebody come build these things here.
Right.
And then it just tumbles. And it grows out. The idea of this ecosystem.
Right.
Everybody forgets that ecosystems kind of grow at their own pace.
They do.
And grow in their own shape based on the conditions that exist. You can't put a cornfield in the desert.
Right.
You can't go grow trees in the Arctic for a reason.
Right.
Conditions aren't right. So the local governments try to create the right conditions to encourage that ecosystem to spring up. And sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not. But it takes a long-term look and view to say, this is something that's going to benefit us and other people, and we want to do it, and we're committed to it.
Well, this is something that we've talked about. This is my last question, because we could talk about this for hours. But a while ago you said, are we taking everything that's on the ground and now just moving it up into the sky and just trading congestion from one place to another? What are your thoughts on that now? 'Cause that was a couple of years ago when we talked about that. How do we balance that? Will we still see trucks and delivery and stuff happening on the ground? And how do you think that's going to come together?
I think if we allow it to evolve, it will find its own levels. But yes, I still remain a little bit skeptical that when you look at the number of people that come down either I-75 or I-85 in the morning, and generally it's 1 or 2 people per car, and you say, okay, I'm going to replace that car with one UAV or AAV, and then you start counting it, that's a lot of landing spots, because forget the figures, but it's something on the order of 200,000 people come into Fulton County every morning, right? And they come between 7:30 and 9, and they leave between 4:30 and 6. So that's a lot of people to move 4 at a time, with anything, whether it's a car or a UAV. And so you have to just look at the flow and say, wow, that's a lot of landing spots. That's a lot of different places. So it's going to take some time to work that out.
And then if you include deliveries and cargo, replacing truck traffic, I mean, so now it's you got that moving up as well. And the thing that I keep hesitating about is that the landing spots in the midtown, downtown areas are on real estate that's really, really expensive. Exactly.
So there's no way that they can just be a landing spot and have no other purpose that helps monetize that space. Because if they don't, then the landing spot is going to have to bear the cost. And I keep asking the question, how are we going to do that? I get a lot of quizzical looks, but I'm not sure that everybody has that quite worked out yet.
Because we're going to need a lot of drone ports, a lot of rooftops, and as we talked before, you've got HVAC units up there. So most buildings haven't been set for this. So it will be interesting. To your point, it is a process, and it will take time for it to develop out. Wonderful.
But it will.
It will.
It took us 100 years to get the automobile right.
And I think we're still working on that. Well, Gary, thank you. These have been your 6 questions on ZeoCast Live. We look forward to having you back in the future.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.